The life you took for granted is becoming unaffordable. Right now, more than 60% of Americans say they're living paycheck to paycheck. Credit card debt has exploded past $1 trillion for the first time in history. The average car payment is over $700 a month. Grocery prices are up more than 25% since 2020. Electricity bills have surged in dozens of states by double digits, and utilities are asking for billions more in rate hikes. And here's the part no one wants to say out loud. These aren't luxury expenses. This is food, heat, shelter, transportation, healthcare, the basics. If you feel like normal life is getting more expensive by the month, you're not imagining it. The margin between stable and struggling is shrinking fast, and the things you used to pay for without even checking your bank account, they now require strategy, sacrifice, or debt. So let's break it down because what's happening isn't random. It's structural, and it's changing what middle class even means in America. 10. Keeping the lights on. There was a time in America when your electric bill was an afterthought. It showed up, you paid it, you maybe complained about summer AC usage, and that was it. Now, keeping the lights on is quietly becoming a middle-class stress test. Residential electricity prices in the U.S. have climbed more than 25% since 2020, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. In some states, New York, California, Massachusetts, parts of the Southeast households are seeing 40%, 50%, even 70% spikes compared to just a few years ago. And this isn't just because you're using more. Transmission fees, infrastructure upgrades, renewable integration mandates, wildfire mitigation costs, and now the explosion of AI data centers are all being passed directly to you. Utilities across the country have requested tens of billions in new rate hikes through 2026. Billions! And here's the part most people miss. Electricity demand is projected to surge for the first time in decades because AI facilities can consume as much power as small cities. Who pays for the grid upgrades? You do. Natural gas bills have followed the same path, with winter heating costs jumping double digits year over year in many regions. Meanwhile, median real wages haven't kept pace with utility inflation. So what used to be a fixed, predictable necessity is now volatile and anxiety-inducing. And utilities are regional monopolies. You don't get to shop around the way you do for groceries. You either pay or you sit in the dark. That's not a convenience anymore. That's leverage. And when a basic utility starts competing with groceries and car payments for priority in your monthly budget, that's when you know something fundamental has shifted. Electricity used to be infrastructure. Now it's becoming a premium service disguised as a necessity. 9. A basic roof over your head. A basic. Housing in America used to follow a simple logic. Work hard, qualify for a mortgage, build equity, stabilize your life. That formula is breaking down. Since 2020, home prices nationally surged over 35%, according to the Case-Shiller Index. In many metro areas, they jumped 50% or more. Then mortgage rates climbed from under 3% to hovering around 7%, effectively doubling the cost of borrowing. So even if prices cool slightly, monthly payments remain historically high. The median mortgage payment for a new buyer is now thousands more per year than it was just a few years ago. Rent hasn't offered relief either. National rents spiked nearly 20% between 2020 and 2023, with some cities seeing far worse. And here's what's really happening underneath the surface. Institutional investors and private equity firms have purchased hundreds of thousands of single-family homes over the past decade, turning starter homes into rental portfolios. Supply remains constrained due to zoning laws, construction labor shortages, and material costs that never fully normalized post-pandemic. Meanwhile, property taxes and insurance premiums are surging, especially in climate-risk states like Florida and California, where insurance carriers are pulling out entirely. So even homeowners who locked in low mortgage rates are facing escalating escrow payments. What used to be a basic milestone owning a modest home is now mathematically out of reach for millions of households earning median incomes. When shelter consumes 40% or more of take-home pay, it's no longer stable housing. It's financial exposure. A roof over your head was once security. Increasingly, it's becoming a luxury reserved for dual-income earners, inherited wealth, or those who bought before the window slammed shut. 8. Driving a reliable car. Not a luxury SUV, not a performance vehicle. Just a reliable car to get to work. That's it. And even that has transformed into a financial event. Since 2020, new car prices have risen roughly 20%, with the average new vehicle transaction price hovering near $48,000. Used cars historically, the affordable alternative, spiked nearly 40% at their peak and remain significantly elevated compared to pre-2020 levels. Add to that auto loan interest rates now averaging above 7% for new cars and well into double digits for many used car loans, especially for borrowers without pristine credit. The average monthly car payment for new vehicles has crossed $700. That's before insurance. And insurance premiums have surged more than 20% year over year in many states due to repair costs, parts inflation, extreme weather claims, and litigation trends. Repairs themselves are more expensive because modern vehicles are loaded with sensors, cameras, and computerized systems that turn minor accidents into $1,000 fixes. Even basic maintenance has climbed sharply due to labor shortages and parts costs. And here's where it gets more structural. America is built around cars. Public transportation is limited outside major cities. So when vehicle ownership becomes expensive, it's not optional spending, it's economic participation. You need a car to earn income in most of the country. When transportation costs rival rent in some cases, we're not talking about lifestyle creep. We're talking about mobility becoming stratified. The ability to drive safely to work used to be assumed. Now it requires financing, strong credit, rising insurance tolerance, and the willingness to carry long-term debt. That's not convenience. That's conditional access. And once access becomes conditional, it stops being ordinary and starts becoming exclusive. 7. Going to the doctor without fear. Not long ago, going to the doctor was stressful because of the diagnosis, not because of the bill. Now, for millions of Americans, the financial anxiety hits before the stethoscope even does. Health insurance premiums for employer-sponsored family plans have risen over 20% in the past 5 years, with the average annual premium now exceeding $23,000, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation. Even if your employer covers most of it, your share keeps climbing. Then there are deductibles. The average deductible for a single worker is now well over $1,700, and many marketplace plans carry deductibles north of $6,000 or even $8,000 before coverage really kicks in. So what does that mean in real life? It means you're paying hundreds per month for insurance, and then thousands more before it actually works. And that's assuming you stay in-network, don't need a specialist outside the approved list, and don't get surprise billed by an out-of-network anesthesiologist you never chose. Medical debt remains one of the leading causes of personal bankruptcy in the United States. Roughly 100 million Americans carry some form of medical debt. Think about that. That's nearly 1 in 3 adults. And it's not always catastrophic illness. It's emergency room visits. It's outpatient procedures. It's prescriptions that suddenly cost triple because a manufacturer changed pricing. Even routine care is becoming strategic. People are spacing out checkups, skipping follow-ups, cutting pills in half, avoiding ambulances because a short ride can cost $1,200. Healthcare in America was always expensive, but it used to feel survivable if you had insurance. Now, even insured households are budgeting around the possibility of getting sick. When basic medical access requires financial planning the way a vacation used to, that's not a system functioning normally. That's a necessity slowly morphing into a privilege. And when preventative care becomes optional because of cost, the long-term economic consequences compound. A healthy population isn't just a moral issue, it's an economic backbone. And right now, that backbone is under financial strain. 6. Buying groceries without doing math. There was a time when grocery shopping was about preference. Brand or generic, steak or chicken. Now it's arithmetic. Since 2020, grocery prices have risen more than 25% overall, with some categories eggs, beef, dairy, processed foods experiencing spikes of 40% to 100% during peak inflation waves. Even though inflation has cooled statistically, prices haven't gone back down. They've just stopped rising as fast. That's a very different thing. The average American household now spends thousands more per year on food compared to just a few years ago. And what's changed isn't just price, it's shrinkflation. Boxes are smaller, packages are lighter, portions are reduced while prices hold steady or rise. You're paying more for less and doing it repeatedly every single week. Meanwhile, credit card balances nationwide have surpassed $1 trillion for the first time in history, and a significant portion of that growth has been driven by everyday expenses like groceries and gas, not luxury splurges. Food banks across the country are reporting record demand, including from working families who never needed assistance before. That's the part people don't always see. These aren't just unemployed households. These are dual-income families whose paychecks no longer stretch the way they did. And when food, the most basic recurring necessity, requires coupon stacking, bulk calculations, app comparisons, and strategic meal skipping, something fundamental has shifted in the cost structure of daily life. Grocery shopping used to be mundane. Now it's tactical. And when you find yourself standing in the cereal aisle debating whether name-brand cereal is a splurge, that's when you realize it's no longer just inflation, it's compression. The margin between stable and strained is getting thinner. Food security was once assumed in a developed economy. Increasingly, it feels conditional. And when the basics require strategy, the definition of luxury quietly expands. 5. Taking a break without financial fallout. There used to be a time when taking time off meant exactly that: rest. A vacation wasn't some exotic indulgence, it was part of a normal working life. You worked, you saved a little, you unplugged for a week, and you came back refreshed. Now, for a growing number of Americans, taking time off feels financially reckless. Paid time off has quietly eroded in real terms. While many jobs technically offer PTO, fewer workers actually feel able to use it. According to recent labor surveys, nearly half of American workers leave paid vacation days unused every year, not because they don't want rest, but because they can't afford the consequences of stepping away. Missed overtime, missed commissions, missed gig income, missed opportunities. For hourly workers, time off often means zero income, full stop. And even for salaried workers, workloads don't pause, they pile up. On top of that, the cost of travel itself has exploded. Airline fares are up roughly 25% compared to pre-2020 levels. Hotel prices have surged even more in many regions, especially domestic destinations. Rental cars, once an afterthought, can now cost more per day than a hotel room did a decade ago. Add food, activities, and fees, and suddenly a simple family vacation can rival a month's rent. So what happens? People don't rest. They burn out quietly. They stay plugged in. They answer emails from the beach. They skip trips altogether. And burnout isn't just emotional, it's economic. Chronic stress reduces productivity, increases healthcare costs, and leads to job turnover that destabilizes income even further. Rest used to be a built-in pressure release valve in the system. Now it's something you need disposable income to access safely. When recovery itself becomes a luxury, the workforce doesn't recharge, it erodes. And a society that treats rest as optional eventually pays for it in exhaustion, illness, and instability. Time off didn't used to feel like a financial gamble. Increasingly, it does. 4. Raising kids without constant financial anxiety. For generations, raising children in America came with sacrifices, but it didn't feel like a high-risk financial strategy. Today, parenting has become one of the most expensive and stress-loaded economic decisions a household can make. Child care costs alone have reached staggering levels. In many states, full-time daycare for one child now exceeds the cost of in-state college tuition. National averages put daycare around $10,000 to $15,000 per year per child, and far higher in urban areas. That's after taxes, after rent, after health care, and that's just the starting line. Add healthcare premiums for family plans, which now regularly exceed $20,000 per year, plus deductibles and out-of-pocket costs. And the math gets brutal fast. Then there's food, clothing, school supplies, extracurriculars, transportation, and eventually college savings, all rising faster than wages. According to recent estimates, the cost to raise a child to age 18 now approaches or exceeds $300,000 for middle-income families, not including college. And wages? They haven't remotely tracked that trajectory. So families adapt by delaying kids, having fewer children, or relying on debt, credit cards, buy now, pay later plans, family loans, grandparents stepping in. Parenting hasn't just become expensive, it's become financially fragile. One unexpected bill, one job disruption, one medical issue, and the entire balance collapses. That's why birth rates are falling. Not because people don't want families, but because they don't trust the economics of raising one. When something as fundamental as having children starts to feel like a luxury reserved for the financially insulated, that's not a cultural shift. That's a systemic warning. Families are the base unit of an economy. And when building one feels unsustainable, the long-term consequences ripple far beyond individual households. 3. Eating out without regret. There was a time when grabbing dinner out wasn't a strategic decision. It was normal. Friday night pizza, a quick stop at a diner, taking the kids for burgers after a game. It wasn't a status symbol, it was just part of American life. Now, even fast food feels like a line item you debate. Since 2020, restaurant prices have risen more than 25% nationally, and in many cities it's significantly higher. Fast food chains that once anchored the cheap meal category now regularly charge $12 to $18 per person for what used to cost half that. Sit-down restaurants? Add 20% inflation in menu prices, automatic gratuities, service fees, credit card surcharges, and you can easily clear $100 for a simple family dinner. And here's the structural piece most people don't think about. Restaurants are dealing with higher wholesale food costs, higher wages due to labor shortages, higher rent, higher insurance, and higher utility costs, and all of that funnels directly into your check. But your wages haven't jumped 25% to match that dinner bill. So what used to be casual becomes calculated. You start scanning menus before walking in, you split entrees, you skip appetizers, you stop ordering drinks, you mentally convert everything into grocery equivalents. That burger is 3 pounds of ground beef. And this isn't about luxury dining. This is about normal social participation. Restaurants are part of community life. Birthdays, dates, work lunches, celebrations. When routine outings start to feel financially irresponsible, social life contracts. And when social life contracts, so does local economic activity. We're already seeing restaurant traffic soften in certain regions because consumers are pulling back. Eating out used to be a release valve, a small indulgence that didn't destabilize your budget. Increasingly, it feels like a discretionary splurge, and when even the simplest shared meal becomes something you second-guess, that's when you know the definition of luxury has quietly expanded. 2. Retiring with dignity. For decades, the American promise was straightforward. Work for 40 years, pay into Social Security, maybe build a pension or 401k, and eventually step back with stability. That formula is under serious pressure. First, traditional pensions have largely disappeared in the private sector. They've been replaced by 401ks, which shift risk from employers to individuals. That means your retirement security is tied directly to market performance, your contribution discipline, and whether you avoided major financial setbacks along the way. Meanwhile, inflation over the past few years has eroded purchasing power dramatically, especially for retirees on fixed incomes. Healthcare costs in retirement are staggering. Fidelity estimates that the average retired couple may need over $300,000 just to cover healthcare expenses throughout retirement, not including long-term care. Add housing, utilities, food, and property taxes that continue rising, and the math tightens quickly. Social Security, which replaces only a portion of pre-retirement income, was never designed to be the sole support system, yet millions rely on it as exactly that. And with projections showing trust fund strain in the coming decade, uncertainty hangs over the system's long-term structure. At the same time, Older Americans are re-entering the workforce in growing numbers, not always because they want to, but because they have to. Retirement accounts took hits during market downturns, and many households simply didn't accumulate enough savings to offset rising living costs. The concept of retiring at 62 or 65 with comfort and predictability is becoming less common outside of higher income brackets. For many, retirement now means part-time work, downsizing, relocating, or relying on family support. Stepping away from labor used to be the earned reward after decades of contribution. Increasingly, it feels like a financial balancing act that only works if everything goes right. And when dignity in old age depends heavily on market timing and medical luck, that's not stability, that's exposure. 1. Feeling financially safe without constant vigilance. There was a time when financial security in America wasn't about optimization, monitoring, or constant adjustment. It was a baseline expectation. You earned, you saved, you paid your bills, and you trusted that if you followed the rules, the system would more or less work. Today, that sense of quiet financial safety has become the rarest luxury of all. More elusive than a vacation. More fragile than homeownership. What's changed isn't just prices, it's the mental load. Households are now managing a web of variable costs that can spike without warning. Insurance premiums, utility rates, property taxes, medical bills, interest rates, childcare, food. Even fixed expenses aren't fixed anymore. According to recent consumer surveys, a majority of Americans couldn't cover a $1,000 emergency without borrowing, selling something, or missing another bill. And this isn't about irresponsibility, it's about compression. Wages have not kept pace with the combined rise in housing, healthcare, energy, and debt servicing costs. At the same time, interest rates have made carrying balances more expensive, turning short-term gaps into long-term traps. Credit cards, once a convenience, have become survival tools for everyday expenses, with average APRs now exceeding 20%. That means every unexpected expense echoes for months or years. Financial safety used to mean resilience, the ability to absorb shocks. Now, for many households, life operates in a narrow margin where one disruption cascades into many. Job loss, illness, car trouble, rent hike, any one of these can destabilize an otherwise normal household. So people stay hyper-vigilant. They track balances daily. They delay medical care. They avoid risks. They plan less and react more. And when an economy forces its citizens into constant financial alertness just to stay afloat, it erodes trust in the future. Security isn't about wealth, it's about predictability. And when predictability disappears, so does peace of mind. That's why financial calm, the ability to live without bracing for the next hit, has quietly become the ultimate American luxury. And this is the part that really matters. None of this is happening because people suddenly forgot how to budget. This isn't about lattes, vacations, or bad choices. When the fundamentals of everyday life start requiring debt, stress, and constant vigilance, that's not a personal failure. That's a system under pressure. What makes this moment different is how quiet it is. There's no single crash, no one headline, just a slow squeeze where more people feel it every month and talk about it less. And the danger in that is normalization, when struggling to afford basics starts to feel normal, even though it absolutely isn't. So the question isn't just how do you adapt, it's how long can this continue before something gives? Because economies don't break when people stop buying luxuries. They break when people can't afford necessities. If this video hit close to home, you're not alone, and you're definitely not imagining it. Let me know in the comments what's gotten noticeably more expensive for you, or what used to be normal that now feels out of reach. And if you want more breakdowns like this, calm, honest, and grounded in real data, make sure you're subscribed. Because understanding what's happening is the first step to surviving what comes next.